Thank you for watching. My name is Glen Morgan, and this is We the Govern. And I wanted to just do as quick as I can, describe an issue that I think is going to be discussed by candidates and politicians and some of the political parties, certainly on the freedom liberty side of the Republican Party, going into the 2022 elections. And really what I'm talking about is, this discussion has more to do with this holding ballots till the last minute and then put them in the drop box or hand them to the auditor's office the day of election. And the reason why this has come up is the Joe Kent race kind of showed this come from behind big point swing, because on election night it sounded like he was losing, and then there was this big surge of Republican ballots, and then it put him over the top and he was able to beat incumbent Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler. And so because of that now, and because there's success there, that's going to be promoted as a technique by probably a lot of campaigns and candidates and parts of the Republican Party probably moving forward. So let me explain why, the theory behind this, upsides and downsides of it, and why it's come into vogue lately. Historically, if you'd heard me talk about why you should fill out your ballot and vote early years ago when I was at the Freedom Foundation, or if you hear the Republican Party people do this now, or insiders telling you fill out the ballot and turn it in as early as possible, there's a very practical and rational reason why they were telling you that and why I was telling you that. And the reason is that if you get your ballot in soon, the auditors, because we have mail-in ballots, so these ballots trickle in for weeks before election night, and the auditors and the Secretary of State, they publish everybody who has voted. Not how you voted, they just publish the fact that you voted. And so a sophisticated political campaign can look at the people who voted, they're on these published matchback lists, and they can take those names off of their mailers, off of their phone banking, off of their doorbelling lists. And it makes their political campaigns more efficient as the countdown to Election Day arrives. So they're only required to direct their resources at people who have not voted yet. So that's the theory behind it. I endorsed that theory and supported that for many years. Here's where the things that have, and this has really come up since 2020, and a lot of the concerns where a lot more people are finally paying attention to some of the election integrity issues. And one of the concerns, and I'm going to tell you, this is a legal thing. This, what I'm describing is not illegal at all. If you are an effective political operation, you should be able to look at those matchbacks and get a pretty good idea of how vote profiles are trending in the early days of an election cycle. So Republicans and Democrats aren't registered by party affiliation in our state, but every 4 years of the presidential cycle, you can tell which party primary people participated in, and therefore you can make a pretty good judgment that they're probably Republican or Democrat. And then everybody in the middle, it's a little bit harder, a little bit fuzzier to figure out where they actually stand in the political process. But you're able to do that. And a good campaign, a good party, a good outside observer is going to be able to get a pretty good statistical idea of how a candidate is trending ahead of time based just simply on the profile of the people who have voted. Well, why that matters is that if you are running a campaign and you're running your numbers, you're saying, oh no, our guy looks like he's down 2% as we're coming into November, it gives you a little bit more incentive and motivation to get a really hard-pressed, get-out-the-vote effort to push your guy over the top. That is not illegal. That is something anybody can do. Republicans can do it, Democrats can do it. I think that Democrat Party, and not so much the party, but their outside groups around them, do a better job providing this information to them so they have a better sense of how things are going into the election cycle. The Republicans I don't think they do as good a job. And so because of that, Republicans will feel like, hey, you know, we thought we were doing a great job, and then suddenly our guy got beat by a bunch of ballots coming in at the end. Well, you're seeing there is not necessarily something nefarious. It could be, but it isn't necessarily. It may just be that the other side was running a much better voter ID campaign going into this, knowing who had already voted, and they knew they were behind, and so they did a last-minute push to get a ton more people out to vote for their candidate because they knew they were in trouble. At the same time, if it looks like your guy's way ahead, you're not going to donate a ton or invest a bunch of resources there because you're going to go invest it in somebody else's political campaign. And so you're tracking these matchbacks if you're a good operation, and you're going to basically say, hey, our guy's way ahead, we don't have to worry about it, and we'll shift resources into a different campaign. What Joe Kent's race, in theory, was looking at it was basically from that approach. Now, they may be talking about voter integrity or vote fraud or something else as to why they were doing it, but really, there's nothing illegal about somebody watching that. And so it makes tactical sense if your people that support you are actually capable and consistent and in large enough numbers that they actually do get their ballot in those last day or two. It really probably doesn't make much difference if it goes in, say, 2 days or within 3 days of the election. Nobody's going to have time enough to respond if they see a sudden surge of votes for your candidate. But if your people, if your supporters tend to hold on to them, or they forget about them, or they fall behind their seat, or they get buried under other mail on the kitchen counter, then that's a risky thing to do, because then those votes don't get counted at all because they just forget, or they miss it, or they just don't get the ballot in time. Or if they screw up and they try to put it in the post office at 8 p.m., post office isn't going to stamp those at that time. They only, depending on where you're located, sometimes the mail is picked up a lot earlier in the day, and it's too late if you put it in after that. So this only applies to drop boxes and at the auditor's office, and a lot of people don't know that. So that's the problem you're going to run into. So is it better to get that ballot in early and definitely have it counted for sure, or is it better to surprise the other side at the last minute with a whole bunch of ballots coming in at the very end that are hand delivered to the auditor, or physically put into drop boxes just in those last couple days? I tend to support that campaign because I like that approach. I like that idea, but it is a risky one to take, and the risk is that some of your people forget, or they miss election night, all the things that could potentially be out there. But if you got motivated people like Joe Kent clearly did in his campaign, and enough of them, then you can have surprise come from behind results as they're counting the ballots later. So on election night, it doesn't look so good for you, but then those votes come in later, and it swings your direction. So that's just to explain that whole process and the thought process behind it. I hope this helps you understand when people are talking about that, and there's a little bit of misinformation out there on this subject, and I hope this helped as best I could. If you have any questions or comments about it, please leave those down below. I'll respond as quick as I can, and remember, no matter what, whether you vote early or vote late, definitely get it in time, because otherwise your vote won't count, and the future does belong to those who show up.